What's shaking? Hey, I'm Rick Jordan, and today we're going all in.
We are going across the pond to the US. We have the wonderful Rick Jordan with us here. Welcome to Brave, Bold, Brilliant, Rick.
What's shaking, Jeannette? It's good to be here. I'm excited for our talk today. Yeah, let's go.
I am super excited about this. You have got a lot going on in your world, and we're going to get into everything. Entrepreneurship, business, cybercrime, social media, you name it. Taking a business public.
Yeah.
Which is my first question to you, Rick. My gosh, ReachOut Technology. You started the business, you founded the business, and you took it public. How did you manage that? What are the tricks?
Yeah, I figured it out along the way. And it was, I mean, that's really the gist of it. I mean, if you want to sum it up, I know it doesn't sound romantic, when you talk about it that way. And trust me, nothing about the process is romantic either. The going through it is grueling. It is very emotionally taxing. It is very much a test of your own resilience to go through that process, and it took several years, and it was kind of baby steps the entire way too. I originally hired consultants for this whole thing back in, it was 2020. It was right around the time all the pandemic stuff started. I'm like, I'm doubling down. I'm going after this year because I can see where we need to go. And being the first in this industry as an MSP, we literally were the first to actually go public, which is exciting as well. I like to be the first. When I look around and I see obvious ideas, I'm like, why the hell is nobody else doing this? And then I start to I start to think of the why nobody else is doing this. I'm like, whatever. But then I quickly push that out of my mind. But then going through the process, like calling back to the test of resilience, now I understand. I truly understand why no one else in this industry, or probably the first in many industries, even like Jeff Bezos with Amazon. It's probably like, why did nobody have an online bookstore? Which is the only thing that Amazon did at the start of it, and I'm sure he found out why, but look at where he's at right now. Well, look at where he's at. He just had his yacht raided by the FBI, right? Just a couple of days ago. I can't remember exactly what for. But it's the baby steps, Jeanette, because in 2020, we started doing what was called a Regulation A, a public offering. It's where private companies can sell regulated shares of their company to the general public, and you don't have to be accredited investors. You're not listed. You are not listed when you do a Regulation A. So you have to make your own market. You have to sell the dream, sell the vision, tell everybody about the future. But it is, if you want to compare it, it's kind of like a first round, if you want to look at it that way, a first real round. So after friends and family, because I did a couple of those rounds too prior for investors that wanted to just jump in even before. So they got in at half the share price of the Regulation A. It was 50 cents for them, where the Regulation A was $1 a share. And then after that, it was a few years later. So I started looking. It's like, oh, everybody, the question I got is like, oh, you're public. That's great. It's like, yeah, a portion of the company is. A portion of the company was public with that Regulation A. And they're like, well, where are you listed? I want to go check it out. I'm like, well, and it became this roadblock mentally for both me and them, whoever was asking about it, to be like, well, you can't go look at it. You can't, it's not listed. I'm like, well, I found out that a Regulation A is great in theory. Because if you take it all the way back to, and this is for anybody that's thinking about this, right, for raising capital as a private company, if you take it all the way back to when in the United States, where President Obama established the Jobs Act, he was able to put this Regulation A thing in place. And then President Trump, during his first term, expanded some of the opportunities for this as well. And the whole idea is to be able to sell a lot of shares of your company and raise money from just regular people, and that's not meant to be a condescending term. I'm talking comparing regular investors, people who want to trade on the stock market, who might want to buy $50 or $100 worth of shares. That's it, versus somebody putting hundreds of thousands in or millions of dollars into the company. It's able to go to the public at mass and say, hey, jump on in on this thing. Very much kind of a democratic way of looking at these things. Everybody, of course, gets voting rights. It's common shares, all of that. However, and this is where the grueling part starts, you start figuring out how much this costs, and you start figuring out how long it takes to do this process. And what we thought was going to take, around 6 months ended up taking about 1.5 years. And a friend of mine who went to the Wharton Business School in the U.S., he said, yeah, it's the rule of threes. I'm like, what are you talking about, dude? And he goes, that's what they teach you in Wharton. He goes, it's always going to take 3 times as much time and 3 times as much money as you think it's going to take when you go into it. And that was 100% true. Even after that, we used a reverse merger. So we took an existing company that was already listed on OTC, and I'll get into some of the fun stories on that in a bit. And then we took ReachOut Technology and we jammed it right into that, as a subsidiary. And that's how we ended up becoming listed and going fully public as a company. Now, this whole process, ironically, when I said in 2020, I'm like, cool. I'm telling investors, I'm like, it's going to be 3 years until we're listed. 3 years. And during that time, they're like, hey, where's the process? I'm like, well, we already did. We did a Regulation A. And they're like, well, that's great, but I can't tell my friends to go look it up. And it was 3 years almost to the date. Not planned out, but you talk about like manifestation, and it ended up being that 3 years until we were actually listed, from the time we started the process to going through these intermediary steps to getting listed on OTC under a company now, which is Younglings Ice Cream Corporation. I wish that was a joke, but it's also really funny because now I'm like the Willy Wonka, I say, of cybersecurity. I've been signing things as an ice cream CEO for the last year. And same scenario, right? It's been a year now, a little over a year, going through this reverse merger and audit process, when originally it was going to take 4 months. 3 times as long, and we're just about out of it too. I'm talking like weeks away from what it looks like. We had our transitional annual report filed, our first quarter, second quarter, about a month apart towards the end of last year. And now within the next couple of weeks will be the third quarter. We're completely caught up, current, closed the books on that process after going public, which was supposed to take 4 months, that has now taken a little over a year. So again, same thing held true. 3 times as much time and also 3 times as much money.
Power of 3, Rick. The power
It is.
of 3. I've done lots of mergers and acquisitions myself through my corporate career. I was buying businesses in China, India, Brazil, all over the place. And it takes a long time doing anything like that. Corporate financing, listing, M&A work. But you're hopefully through that process very soon, which has been a massive learning curve for you and the team, I'm sure.
It sure has been, yeah.
With ReachOut Technology, right? You're a leading edge cybersecurity expert. Now, you used some jargon earlier, so I'm just gonna reiterate to people what MSP means, which is a managed service provider.
You got it. Yeah, thanks for breaking it down that way. Right on.
No, it's fine, because some people go, what's an MSP?
Yeah, yep.
So it's a managed service provider, and you are specialists in cybercrime and all of that cyberspace tech piece. So how does your business help the clients that you have? What do you actually do in simple terms for someone that doesn't understand the space in too much detail? Yeah,
you got it. It's complete B2B. A managed service provider is very much B2B. There's no consumer products or services that exist in this market space right now. It is something that I'm looking to change within this sector as well, because I mean, the biggest pillar, it's like, everybody asks, why did you go public? I'm like, well, I have 3 pillars, and the very first one, number 1, is cybersecurity for all, because there's that big gap, right, between what enterprise level customers, I mean, if you look in the US, I'm talking like Fortune 100 companies, banks, right? Large banks, Chase, Bank of America, large institutions, Verizon Wireless, AT&T, humongous corporations that have the budgets to do what they need to do. And still, obviously, they need that protection because, I mean, our wireless system in the US, Verizon and AT&T, was just hacked by China, and they were grabbing text messages, phone calls, records, all of this stuff. And then, of course, the Treasury Department was just hacked too. The United States Treasury Department, same scenario. So obviously it's needed. It's needed at that big level. But then to answer your question directly, it's also needed at the small business level. And that's where MSPs are supposed to shine. So the services that are offered are those same bundles of what a large organization might need at a small business level. And that's where that pillar cybersecurity for all comes in, because it's trying to bridge the gap between how expensive this stuff is to where only enterprise level big business corporations can afford this stuff. But in addition, it's also the competency, because you also have to have the people on board within these organizations to be able to utilize all the tools, to be able to strategize everything that has to be done to keep these bad actors out. No,
Yeah.
well, you might not have China or Russia, for that matter, hacking into your carpet cleaning business. What you will have is you'll have things like e-crime groups, ransomware, that will shut you down to where you can't dispatch your trucks to go clean the rugs. You can't pay people because you can't get into your payroll anymore. All your data is just locked down and encrypted unless you pay $50,000, $500,000, depending on whatever they slap that price sticker on there. And those are the things that we help prevent on the front side. And when it does happen, and I say when, there's that old thing that they say, it's not a matter of if, it's when. I hate it because it's so cliche. So I'll just phrase it as there's no completely secure way of protecting something 100%. Though while a lot of this industry focuses on like, we're going to stop it, we're going to prevent it. It's like, yeah, great. What's the recovery plan when it actually does happen? And that's a big part of what we do too, is a recovery plan, because I'm still proud to say that any of our customers that have been onboarded properly with us more than 90 days, the longest amount of time that anyone's ever been down has been 2 hours. That's it. While it's annoying, we've done full recovery as little as 3 minutes from one of these attacks and getting them back up and running. And it's all process and procedures. I got to tell you, it's not rocket science. And that's what a lot of people say. It's like, oh yeah, you're just smart. You know how to do this. It's your industry. I'm like, no, it's not. I look at it like McDonald's, Jeanette. Seriously, there's a place for everything. There's people flipping burgers. There's people putting the sandwiches together. There's tools like the stagers to where they keep the meat warm. There's individuals that are washing the dishes. There's people dropping fries. There's all places for these things. Just like in cybersecurity, there's a tool for EDR, which is the next gen antivirus. There's a tool for multi-factor authentication. It's just putting the right components together to deliver that outcome. It's really just like puzzle pieces. That's all that it is.
And I think, sorry to interrupt you, I think there is a bit of a perception it's a black art, and people are frightened of it, businesses are frightened of it. And I think that's why it's great, with the business that you have with ReachOut Technology. It's around bringing the best of big business to a small business in a relevant way.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
Problem, because I spent most of my corporate career as a corporate CEO running huge travel businesses globally with thousands of people on my team. But now I also work with big corporates advising them, but I also work with SMEs. And I think it's trying to get that right formula, isn't it, for the business, for the client, and keep it simple, because I think sometimes people get frozen because they're frightened around not understanding a space like this. So how do you make it easy for them so they understand it? You take the pressure away, you deliver the service, and you keep them as safe and secure as possible and minimize the risk.
Yeah, right on. It's a great question. Yeah, and I liked your word formula because it gave me an analogy that I've never used before. So you're going to be the first one to have this. I usually use like the whole like carpenter analogy, which I like. It's like our job is to hang the cabinets and make them look good and so they don't fall down. It doesn't matter if we're using DeWalt tools, Milwaukee, Porter cable, or whatever's in our tool bag, we're delivering that outcome, so your cabinets look beautiful and they don't fall. However, you said the word formula, and specifically to your question, if you want to compare it to the culinary arts, because a recipe is not necessarily complex, or it's not necessarily difficult, but it can be made that way if you don't have people that understand those components. Because if you put like an extra teaspoon in of thyme, or any other herb, you might all of a sudden have a really disgusting tasting dish that you can't even serve. So in MSP world, that's the part that's overwhelming for most MSPs, is they don't take the time to educate themselves on that formula, as you use that word, or on that recipe to be able to put the right components together. And it doesn't even have to be the same across every MSP. It could be, some MSPs can specialize in pasta. Some MSPs can specialize in a great hamburger, or great fish and chips, which I'm a big fan of, by the way. It's just making that batter. You're from UK, obviously, right? There's can be some great fish and chips when it comes to the batter, and then there's some that's like, I never want to taste this thing again. Are you using cod or using haddock? What's your personal preference? Are you using too much salt in the batter, and all of a sudden this thing just, you start to just have dry mouth and cotton mouth because it makes for a poor experience. MSPs are similar in that word formula or the recipe, to where you have to understand the right components, and that's the overwhelming part, because this industry has moved so fast, so incredibly quick, especially over the last, I would say, 8-ish years, is about when cybersecurity, maybe 2016, 2017 is when it started becoming mainstream, or at least edging its way into mainstream. Prior to that, when I started, I remember drinking, some scotch. I have a prop right here, right? It's a rocks glass, right? On New Year's Eve, I think it was 2014, one of our clients had, one of my original clients, actually, when it was just me that founded the company, it was bad actors, and they were from China, because he had 14 international patents on some of the things that he manufactures. Of all things, it's snowplows, right? And biggest snow removal company that exists in the Midwest of the United States. They have something like 1,200 trucks right now. They span lots of different states of the U.S. At that time, he had 14 international patents because he started manufacturing those plows. And China was after the intellectual property. That's really what it was. So New Year's Eve, I had already had like 6 scotches, slammed them back. And here I am fighting China, no tools or anything. This is before cyber was mainstream, fighting China to keep them out, as I see them kind of bouncing all over the world. It was myself and one other dude who's been with me really almost since the start. This was before all these recipe ingredients, this formula existed, so you're thinking only 10 years ago. Yeah, and it's moved so quickly. It's been difficult for the mainstays in this industry, those who have had companies for 20 years. I'm 45 years old, but I'm talking those that are not even much beyond me in years, maybe just 50 years old, who have had a business for 15, 20 years. It's difficult for most people to keep up, especially when they don't know how to expand. And the whole point of your show is being bold, right? And it takes boldness to learn new things.
Yeah,
it takes resilience to adapt to the changes as they come at you. And you don't have to know how to build the stuff in this industry. You just have to know how to use it.
And get smart people around you, Rick, that can do it for you.
Exactly.
Take the pain away, like your good self. And actually, Rick, that leads me on, because you are a big authority. You have a lot of influence, shall we say, in terms of NASDAQ, Harvard. You've spoken on some amazing kind of media platforms, mainly in the US, but you're very much a recognized force. I think you've been described as a magnetic force, Rick. I was reading somewhere, which is a lovely thing to be said about you. But it also, when I was doing some research, showed that you have advised the White House.
Yeah.
Wow. What was that like? What was the situation, and how did you help them, if you're able to disclose?
Yeah, I absolutely can. And I'm looking forward to this possibly being a thing here now, coming up in the next 4 years, because it was with the first Trump administration. And it was in 2020 when I was approached. I've been a part of a lot of entrepreneur groups and other industries, and this was an AI company. So even before AI was mainstream, and we were looking at some things for the Department of Defense, and some of the things, just to really dumb it down, was the ability to machine learn different things like human trafficking routes coming into the U.S. Because, even in the United States, this still hasn't changed in 4 years, and we were looking to change this, is that at the ports, where the ships come in, still pretty much the only security is a dude walking around with a dog sniffing the crates. That's it. So we were looking at tech to be able to pretty much use drones and go out to the sea. It could be employed by the Coast Guard or whoever else, somebody on shore, and scan these ships, and be able to tell all the way down to the individuals that were in these crates. I'm talking kids, right? The human beings, how many were dead, how many were alive, who had broken bones, and start to determine how these, it's sad to put it this way, but how these human products were coming into the United States. If you compare it to drugs or anything else, humans are treated like a commodity, and it's horrible when it comes to human trafficking. They're just treated that way. So we were trying to learn a lot of these things, and then, of course, protect the ports with a lot of other different things. Those things I won't talk about, but this is just an example of that. So in the process, I'm a good communicator, and I've known that, because I have all the tech people, and some tech people, they're amazing, like you were talking about, the brilliant people. They should be in front of computer screens all day long, not really interfacing with other humans. And that's okay. That's okay, because it's a place for all kinds of people in all kinds of industries. I can break down the concepts, and then I can understand at a high level on the technical level, but then speak in plain talk. And then with the history I've had with training from CIA agents and other intelligence arenas, putting all that together, I was able to go into the room, and I was invited by this AI company that I was forming a partnership with, to go in and pretty much sell this whole concept to the Department of Defense. So it was incredible. So we're in there, and the Deputy Secretary of Defense is at the head of the table. I end up at the foot of the table. I think it was just kind of fortuitous destiny. I have the founders of the company on my right side. I have 2 special forces guys on the left side. That's it. 6 people at the table in what was called the Secretary of War room in the White House. And then along the walls was an additional 30-ish individuals, from all different parts of government, from all the different intelligence agencies, the CIA, the NSA, Homeland, CISA, you could go down the list, and it was all they're called CISOs, CISOs, which is a C-level role in companies, which is the Chief Information Security Officer, the CISOs and the network administrators from all these different intelligence agencies, to kind of validate and lend their input into the conversation. And as we're looking to sell this technology really into the government, really partner with the U.S. government to do a very good thing, a very good thing for humans, period, they're asking all the technical questions, and then at the end of the table, here's me, because I'm just listening, I'm absorbing, and I raise my hand, and I'm like, hey, it's a little dramatic. I understand that. It's like, yeah, I'm like, I'm at the foot of the table, mind you. I'm like, I'm just a guy. I'm just a guy who was brought in here that runs a private cybersecurity company. I just happen to speak at places like NASDAQ, Harvard, and go on nationwide media like Fox, ABC, CBS, NBC. And this tech, you're diving too far into the technical. And that's what all these guys are asking. I'm like, grasp the concept, grasp the outcome. And then I went down this long trail, which led to the meeting after the meeting where we sold this, and President Trump's now former and now president-elect in the previous administration, he had the AI defense bill, which was $1 billion project. And we were slicing out about 25 to 30% of that for this project. However, that was through October of 2023, and the political tides shifted. And then all the money went to what he had called back then was Operation Warp Speed, which was all about the COVID vaccine.
Okay.
So the majority of those dollars went into that. This was put on hold. The idea was that he was going to be reelected, which we all know didn't happen, because that was 4 years ago now at this point. And the Biden administration, unfortunately, didn't see this as a priority. So we'll see if it comes back up. But this was, they brought people in, at least the previous administration, to try to address this issue. Try to address, because it's a blend. And I always say that cybersecurity is completely a blend between the technological and the human. And that's where these two intersected for this project, because they recognized that there was obviously a very human issue that no technology was being implemented to help resolve right now. I mean, it was just a canine walking around the ports. What can we do to help stem this problem? And what can we do to actually make us kind of a leader in the world, which I would love to be in order to fight against things like human trafficking and other things that are of that importance level to society. So I'm hopeful that when this administration comes back, obviously it's a very different looking administration now. I mean, we have new departments in the government, in the U.S. government, like DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency. I mean, this would have done that. This would have been very, very efficient and sustainable. That's the cool thing about cyber, is it has a very sustainable and aspect to it that really dives into this magic buzzword of sustainability. It helps that. It reduces expenses and also accomplishes very real human, real world outcomes.
Yeah, and hey, listen, let's hope that project kind of gets,
I hope so.
reignited, and actually you can help solve the problem,
Yeah.
and human basis, most importantly, of course. So fingers crossed on that. But must have been a great experience. But entrepreneurship, business isn't easy. You've just given a great example there, where you go in to pitch to the White House, you win the pitch. It might have been a few meetings in, but you win the pitch ultimately. Yeah. And then the deal doesn't happen in the end. It's never done till it's done, right? So the money's in the bank, it's never done.
You got it. Yeah.
As I'm concerned in business. So, and as an entrepreneur, you do have these highs and lows. You do have these areas where you think you've cracked it, you've got the deal, and then it doesn't happen. And it can be you can have the highs and the lows in business. So how do you, Rick, yourself as a business leader, as an entrepreneur, as a voice in the sector that you're in, kind of bounce back from those disappointments or things that don't go your way, and build that resilience that you mentioned earlier? Because that must have been hugely disappointing when you think you've won the gig and then it doesn't actually happen. But you've got to bounce back, haven't you? So how do you manage yourself bouncing back when things don't go right in business or in life?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the reason being is because I think we have to separate the plan from purpose in order to answer that. And the thing is that plans can change, and they almost always have to change. Your purpose, however, is not something that typically changes. Once you figure out that there's a component that needs to be part of the core of who you are, that's something that doesn't change throughout your entire life. Now, you might have seasons of what that exactly looks like. I've discovered, you might have 5 years, 10 years, 15 years of accomplishing a certain milestone in that purpose. But if you can truly determine what that looks like, and it might not be completely formed. And I coach people, I try to inspire people on this all the time. You might not know exactly what that looks like, because it's not like you're going to seek out your purpose your entire life. Your purpose is right there. It has to reveal itself to you. It's almost kind of the opposite direction. And the only way to accomplish that, I feel, is to actually do some shit, to go out there and actually act on these plans that you develop and be like, I might only know the first step or the second step, what I should do right now or do tomorrow. As long as I execute on that, I'm going to figure out if this is the right direction. Because I know it's like my purpose is not even cybersecurity. That's still a component. That's part of the plan. My purpose is to help humans in any way that comes towards me. And I think that most of us can have that, but I have a huge longing to see people have a transformation. That could be a transformation from, being an employee to an entrepreneur. It could be a transformation from being an abused spouse to somebody in a great relationship. Or a transformation of an underperforming student into somebody who becomes one of the best genius inventors in the world. It's that journey and that transformation that really excites me. And then it's also the other part of who I am at my core is a protector and provider. Yeah, and I know that there's some men especially, right? It's a typical quote unquote male role if you want to look at that, but I don't know how many actually act on that. Yeah, and the protector role, it's like great because I see people being taken advantage of, and it's like I want to help. I see people who they maybe have had a bad stroke of luck in their life, probably because of some decisions that they made. It's like, cool, if you really want to do something about this and you have a desire, I want to be able to help you with this. So even cybersecurity is just part of the plan to accomplish that purpose. It's just a portion of it. Same with speaking on stages or, throwing up reels on an Instagram account, any of that.
I 100% agree with you, Rick. And I think you and I are very similar in lots of ways, because I'm also really clear on my purpose. And Brave, Bold, Brilliant, which is the title of the podcast, really are my values. I 100% believe every single person has got greatness within them. but it's not always easy to unlock it. So my purpose is genuinely to help as many people as possible, whether that's individuals, whether it's businesses, whether it's teams, whether it's huge corporate organizations, step into that greatness. And it is by being brave and bold that they're going to get there and get the brilliant. So that's my purpose, which is similar-ish to your purpose, actually. So it's really, kind of, it's just meant to be. Sometimes when you meet someone, you have a conversation. And I love that there's a bigger picture, because like you, I might be advising someone on selling their business, or I might be doing a big piece of strategy work with a FTSE 100 business. But behind all of that, that's the detail. It's still the same thing. It's actually unlocking potential, going to that next level and being the best version of yourself and the business that you can possibly be. And that's why I exist, and I think that energy that you bring is so important. So it's interesting. We started off having a conversation about cybersecurity, and we've gone all the way around to purpose.
Yeah.
And failing, not failing, but is failing, or is it learning? That example with the White House. Okay, you didn't get the deal. Maybe it's just timing. It might come back to you again in a slightly different form. But I bet you learned a lot through the process. And I would say,
for sure. And the doors that have opened just from going through that process too are just insane.
I can imagine. So if you're not failing, then you're not trying enough. You're in your comfort zone. Get out and try some stuff. Take some action, as you said. I think
if your plan is executed perfectly, exactly how you planned it, it probably wasn't a big enough plan.
Agreed, 100%, Rick. And I want to talk a little bit about your presence on social media.
Yeah.
Because before we press record, obviously I did stalk you, Rick. We always do our research, our due diligence on all of our guests with my amazing team. But you've got quite a decent following on Instagram at 1.6 million followers. And before we press record, I said, I'm really interested how you've built, such a great presence on Instagram. And you said, well, it's all been done genuinely. There's no kind of, black art behind it. Can you talk us through that? And why is it important, do you think, to have a following on social media? And then I want to touch a little bit on the pros and the cons of social media, because there's a lot of BS out there as well, as we all know.
There is.
You seem like a very straight up kind of guy. So Instagram, following, getting your voice out there. How have you done it? How have you built your presence? Why is it important?
Yeah, for sure. And if we can be transparent on that word genuinely as well, because genuine does not mean limiting yourself to just posting and trying to build organically. One of the best things I've learned in my life, and this is social media in also relation to speaking and going on as much TV as I have, almost always, at least I haven't found a situation where it has not been the case in my life. I'm open to somebody else's view. You always have to pay to play when you first start out, in order to do some of these bigger things. I mean, the stages, like you talked about, it's like the NASDAQ is an example. My very first one, when I launched the personal brand, that was an event that I paid to be at. It was an entrepreneur event, and you could look at it as a sponsor of that event, so where I got a speaking slot. And out of that, I got a lot of great collateral photos. I mean, my face on the Jumbotron in Times Square, the backside of it though is like I sponsored the event, which is how I was there, and out of that, of course, came business. Even the consulting agency that worked on my Regulation A for me, they were trying to vet people. They stalked me, just like you said, and they found that photo of me in the NASDAQ boardroom, and that's our guy. That's somebody who we want to work with. So same with social media. Like the genuineness of it does not mean that you don't pay for exposure, because it's the exposure side of it. It's not buying followers. I've done giveaways, so I've partnered with companies. I think the biggest one I ever did was like a Cardi B thing. She was running a giveaway for a Mercedes or something like that, and I think I paid $10,000 to be a part of that. Again, it's a sponsorship of an event. And as that, the whole thing, it's like you get exposure as part of that, because she's like, hey, here's our sponsors for this. And then there's my handle, so of course it generated, just that alone, I think generated something like 40,000 followers in just a matter of a couple of days because of the exposure. It's advertisement, it's marketing, that's what it is. So the genuineness of it, I don't think anybody needs to limit to be like, oh, I'm just going to post, I'm going to go out there. There's very few that I believe that make it that way. If you're not running ads, if you're not doing collaborations or not doing sponsorships, if you're not investing your resources into your presence, your exposure is going to be minimized. That's just how things literally work in the world. Now, the other stuff that has done a lot of great for my online presence has been doing things offline that have generated traffic online. So when I do speak, there's a lot of influx, and I speak many times a year. There's a lot of influx. When I do go on TV, I just went on News Nation yesterday. That's where Cuomo, you went from CNN to News Nation, large nationwide news network here, just like CNN. They actually have higher ratings than CNN now. And when I'm on there, I get millions of eyeballs on me, literally millions. I mean, I did just Fox in Washington, D.C. to talk about something stupid 2 years ago about UFOs. And they reached to me and they're like, yeah, that was just a cool 1.7 million people who saw that segment. And those now at this stage, I don't pay to do those. I paid for a media coach 6 years ago who trained me and put me in front, almost 7 years ago now, and put me in front of segment producers for local news networks like Albuquerque, New Mexico, some tiny little town in the United States, to now I have this credibility portfolio that I've built up. So they know that they have a reliable guest. And trust me, I'm a lot better now than I was 7 years ago too. There's always been a level of talent, yes. At the same time, I've worked hard on it because I think I'm approaching 250 or so TV appearances in the last 7-ish years. Number 250 looks and sounds and feels very different than number 1 or number 10, just like podcasting. Similar scenario. You have to augment, if you want to build a great influence, and even more so, that portfolio of credibility, which can be your Instagram account, which can be your clips that you post on your website. It has to be done now, and you have to start paying for that initially to get to the point to where you don't pay for them or you get paid for them. That's the trajectory that I don't think a lot understand. It's like you think you're going to be a great speaker or an author, and all of a sudden people are just going to invite you, even more so, pay you to come on their stages and start teaching people. That's not how it works. You don't get a great book deal, a New York Times bestseller with your very first book because no publisher is going to take you. You have no credibility. Yeah. You have to build that up, just like CNN or, I'm told that Cuomo's going to give me a call. I've talked with his producer a couple times. Newsmax I was on twice just 2 weeks ago. I've done Fox. I've done all these Cheddar, Bloomberg, all these amazing nationwide networks that even get broadcast out in the world. And they call me now to say, hey, can you come break this down for the country, please? It's because I'm credible. And they wouldn't have done that 7 years ago.
No, and I think I really love your honesty, Rick, because there's naivety, I think, around some of this, isn't there?
There is, very much so.
And there is a sort of, I suppose, a purist view of the world. You shouldn't have to do that. And I'm an expert in my field and I lead with my values and all of that. But then there's also, it's business, right? It's also
it
business.
Is. Everything's business.
And the algorithms, I'm not an expert on social media, but very few people will see your posts organically. So if you've got a strong message and you want to help people and support, in a positive, constructive way, then you're doing a disservice to the world by not actually being able to reach people. So what you've described is, again, just a mechanism to reach more people, help more people. Yeah. And of course, through that process, if you've not got the credibility, the knowledge, the experience, well, then that's what's fake. But if you've got that and you have the right combination, then that's the magic. I think on social media, what you see is a lot of people that present a version of themselves when you actually scratch the surface, there's nothing there. The experience is not there. And that is fake. That is disingenuous. But what you've just described there is sound business. It's serving in a way that allows you to reach more people, help more people, and do good in the world. But you've got to be realistic about it. But it's the credibility and your values that sit behind it that make it relevant and, and ultimately positions you in the correct way in the world, right?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more on that too. And even now, even on the days when I get asked to come on TV on the nationwide network, it's like on social, I still pay for eyeballs. I still pay for exposure. through ads or groups or whatever it is. But then the stuff that I do, it's like going on TV. That also gives the exposure. Like I said, millions of people at a time, and then they look you up. And this is a process. You just have to continuously step up. Not everybody's like the hooked tall girl, that all of a sudden starts going all over the place and goes viral just because of a weird clip that was put out there. Most people are not that way.
No.
Thank God too, by the way. She's interesting.
Yeah. We'll look at that one to one side. But Rick, in terms of, you've had a great business life, you've had the ups, the downs, the great successes. You've obviously, very much aligned with your purpose. And you lost your father at an early age, didn't you?
Yep.
How old were you when your father passed away? And how do you think that has shaped who you are as a human being, as a man, as a business person, as a father, as a husband, as a friend? Because that clearly was a big thing in your life at the time, right?
Yeah, it sure was. I was almost 2 weeks past my 16th birthday when that took place. My brother and sister were even younger. There's a pretty decent age gap between us. My brother's almost 5 years and my sister almost 6 years. So they were 11 and 10 at the time. Very, very young. And it very much shaped things. I do truly believe that people are designed to be the way that they are at birth. And then, of course, you have your environment and the way that you're brought up and the values that are instilled by you, by the people that are around. Parenting I'm huge into that, of course, because, if you want your kids to learn your values, you are the one that has to instill those values into your kids. You can't abdicate that responsibility. And I had a great example in my dad for that, for the 16 years. It's something I can look back on. Even when things take place at Christmas, it's like I still miss him. This last year, I absolutely still miss him. And I only knew him for 16 years. If you look at it that way, my brother and sister are only 10 and 11. I don't know if they miss him. I don't know, because how much can you actually form emotionally in those years? I was grateful I was a little bit older to still have matured for that. Still, it was a jump from having this, if you want to call it a normal childhood, with a great set of parents, into having someone need to take adult responsibilities right away. That's really what took place. And when I say that you still are who you are, I started working with a work permit before it's technically legally allowed. You can get this permission to do underage work, and I started at McDonald's, about a year and a half before. I got special release from school, to do that. I wasn't really interested in great grades. It was just who I was. I wanted to apply things right away and learn things through an alternate route. That still hasn't changed. Look at where I'm going. It's like, sure, let's go public. Why not? Know how to do it? Nope, I sure don't. But I'm gonna find out how. That was still me at 14 and 15 years old. So when my dad passed away, it was still very much me to be like, well, there are things that have to be done. My mom obviously cannot go to work and support the family financially. And at the time she was only making $7 an hour to be able to provide for us, and at the same time get my brother and sister to school, get them up in the morning, make sure that they're fed. So it was sharing some of those responsibilities. It was not parenting. I was never a parent to my younger brother and sister. I was a caretaker. And that's one of the biggest things that shifted. But I had a great example on how to do that. But at the same time, it's still who I was before then. I was still involved in church a lot then, and I always wanted to help to do whatever I possibly could. I see some of these same traits in my kids. I've seen him since, and my oldest especially, Richard, since he was 3 years old with his mom. I remember him saying, "I help you, mommy." He would just jump in, and even at 3, like to lift something. It's like, oh, you're strong. It's you are who you are from birth. And you have different things throughout your life that you can either rise up to who you were made to be, or you can cower and run away from who you're supposed to be. Because these challenges, like my dad passing, sure, it created certain traumas, that I had to deal with later in life. Talking like 20 years later in life is when you recognize them. Things that I was limiting myself because I saw what happened. It's this weird stuff that life tends to play on your brain. And I know trauma is a great buzzword. Everybody loves that word. but real trauma, PTSD, if you want to look at it that way, mine specifically, without getting in too deep, it's like I thought that no matter if I succeeded or I failed, I was going to physically die. So if I do really, really well in life, I'm a great parent, I have great relationships, I take a company public and it works, I'm going to die early. If I don't achieve too much, if I don't do anything at all, I'm going to die early. So I kept myself right in this place in the middle up until about 2020, 2021, to where I dealt with it when I realized it. It's like you start to realize you have these things, but still about who I am in my core never changed from the point when I was a little tiny kid. And you start to see that because that's the best view you have about who people are is when they're young and they haven't been tainted yet. And you can see that go through. So as a responsibility as a parent, which I believe my dad did really, really well, was to be able to allow that to grow. And even if I did horrible in school, which I did because I just hated homework, I saw no purpose to it, right? I know I'm intelligent. I know I'm smart. When I got a concept, when I understood it, I just didn't see any reason to continuously practice it when I already knew what I needed to know to get to the next step. And I still apply that today. There's certain things you need to practice, improve on, because you continuously have better results. Like speaking, for example, I still talk to people about, coaching me on different ways that I can better reach an audience because I want to get better and better and better at it because it's something I'm actively doing. Calculus, screw that, dropped out after 2 weeks. I'm like, I'm never going to use that. It's not part of my purpose, but I saw my dad do some of the similar things, but that was always me. Since I was very, very young. People get off track and they start to blame things that take place in their life. And this is where when we talked about plans and purpose earlier, to have a callback, the purpose doesn't change. Your plans might. How you get there, actually, I guarantee you your plans are going to change. They have to. And if they're not, you're probably too stuck in perfection. And you're like, oh, that went exactly how I planned. I'm sorry. So you're telling me that you actually learned nothing through that process. You didn't learn how to adapt, how to grow, how to get outside of your comfort zone, how to be unreasonable with your goals. You didn't learn any of that through the process. You just played it safe because it was exactly according to what you had. You had no curveballs thrown at you. Maybe make it a little more difficult next time.
And what do you think your dad would say? What do you think he would say about you now? If he could send you a little message, what do you think he would say about it?
I mean, I think he would throw his hands up in the air because it was a lot of me that I think that he didn't quite understand, especially I remember my parents talking that young. It's like, we don't know what to do with this kid. I mean, it's like he just failed English class. How do we get him motivated to do the work he's supposed to do? To get good grades. But in my mind, I'm thinking like the good grades didn't define me, and we never had a chance to really have that conversation, so I don't know, because he passed on. I don't know what he would say about that right now, but if I imagined him, because he'd still be the dude that would show up to everything. I mean, I played baseball for 9 years. The guy was at every single one of my games. It was an important thing for him in his life to prioritize being there, and for me, it's a little different for me with my kids. I prioritize being able to show them things that are possible. So while my dad established this amazing, solid foundation for me from a family life, my kids, I want to establish that they know that they're loved, respected, cherished, supported, prioritized, whether I'm there with them physically or whether I'm out traveling. And when they see that I go out and I chase after my dreams, because that's one thing I don't know. I don't really know what my dad's dreams were. And I saw him, maybe his dream was just to provide that amazing family. And there wasn't much beyond that, which is great because that means that he won, right? He won the game. For me, I want to go after everything that is possible that's within my purpose. And that's what I want to show my kids because this is like generational building. My dad had, and this was a thing for me, my dad, his parents got divorced when they were 16. The same thing happened with his dad and my dad's grandfather, 16 years old. It's like the father was completely removed from the life. And then look at me, father completely removed from my life when I was 16 years old. It's like that's something I want to be able to show them that doesn't have to happen. So when you talk, if you want to call it a generational curse, I don't know what you want to call it. It's like I'm a Can I swear on here? I don't know if I can. Maybe I don't.
Oh, yeah.
I'm a fucking curse breaker. And that's, I get a little emotional with this because that is part of my purpose.
Yeah.
And I need to show my kids that.
Yeah. There's another way.
Yeah. I don't care how big the obstacle is. Whatever dreams you have, now, mind you, none of my kids could ever be a pro baseball player. They're not, but maybe my oldest, right? I'm not going to instill because there's physical characteristics with them, right? There's a floor that you kind of have to start at. My youngest son is 6'5". He, 14 years old and 6'5". It was like, oh, he's going to play basketball. I'm like, no, he's not. Like the dude is so uncoordinated. It's not within his makeup to be able to do that, which it's not his purpose. But he wants to do something like the Tonight Show, like Jimmy Fallon. He wants to be in entertainment. It's like, cool. I can see you with that because he's super witty and he comes up with these things all the time. I remember him practicing jokes. Literally, when he was 12 years old, he heard "That's What She Said" for the first time, I think, on The Office. And then he kept practicing it for maybe 2 months straight and kept going. I'm like, nope. And I never explained it to him what it actually meant because he didn't ask. I do believe that if your kids ask the questions, when they're old enough to ask the questions, they're old enough to know the answers. He just never asked. He just kept practicing. And then one day he got him like, that's it, dude. He's like, oh. Then he understood the whole thing. But my daughter, it's like if I didn't do the things that I'm doing right now, and doing all these, if you want to call them big things, she would have never auditioned for AMDA in New York and got accepted and got a scholarship. This just happened a couple months ago and would not be pursuing being on Broadway. In a year and a half, she'll be auditioning for shows on Broadway, and she's 17 right now. She just got accepted into one of the most prestigious musical theater academies that exists in New York. And if it's like, I know when I took her to the audition, it's like if I didn't do the things that I did and go after my purpose and try to continuously provide an environment so where that purpose is revealed, none of my kids would want to do the things that they want to do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Rick, I think your dad would be incredibly proud. It's like also like you drop a pebble in a pond and the ripple effect, right? And how far that reaches when it reaches the shore or wherever. And the impact that you're having is truly wonderful. So you should be incredibly proud. I'm sure your dad will be very proud of you as well.
I think so. I know so. I still think he'll throw up his hands in the air and be like, why is he doing that? But whatever, it's working, Well,
that's it. You're your own man, aren't you? But you're also, as you say, the product of two incredible parents and all the experiences that you've had and everything along the way. And we're all work in progress, right? Until the day we die.
You got it.
So no, that's wonderful. And Rick, if you think through your life, and I'm sure you've had lots of great advice over the years, can you think of any standout advice that's really stood you in good stead?
Well, we definitely talked about the rule of threes, right? That was one of the good ones, that just totally broke every single myth. The other piece of advice was, let me see if I phrase it this way, because the way that I phrase it right now is that, I'm only at where I am today because of the mentors and coaches that I've had along the way. And with that, it was be teachable. It was around that, and that's the biggest thing, because everybody can be hard-headed. Everybody thinks that I can be pretty stubborn. In a lot of ways, I'm just pretty confident. I think there's a very stark difference between arrogance and confidence, because arrogance is not allowing your mind to accept anybody else's viewpoint, to not even entertain it. Whereas confidence is, what you know, and even more so, people say this, it's like you understand that you might not know something about it. So I think the only way that you can help establish that healthy ego, that's what I'll call it, as a healthy ego, is through mentors and coaches, especially the ones that'll just tell you how it is and be like, you're wrong. You need people to be able to tell you that you respect, that you have mentally submitted to have this place in your life. And be selective too, because there's been great coaches that I've had. There's been a few weird ones. At the same time, there have not been any coaches or mentors that have spanned a really long period of time. I think that one that I have right now is Kevin Harrington from the original Shark from Shark Tank. He's on my board of the company, still a mentor, right? And the reason he's still a mentor of mine is because he continuously evolves. And that's a big part with coaches. If you see them get to the point to where you're having these conversations and you're not progressing any further with this stuff, it's like, give me some more info. It's like, well, that's it. It's okay to be like, cool, this person taught me as much as they knew. And that's a season to be able to move on to somebody else. So it is coming back to that best advice of just be teachable.
Yeah, I so agree with you. That's great advice to pass on to anyone that's listening that hasn't had a mentor, coach, or maybe they have in the past and they've had a break or they need something fresh. Yeah, absolutely. We're always, I think, learning and growing through life and business and the process. So yeah, absolutely. And Rick, if you could describe this year in one word. I know you've got lots of words, but what would be one word that would describe this year for you, do you think?
Oh, the last year, 2024, definitely would be resilience. Absolutely. Taking the company public, dealing with some of the hits that I had in business with bad acquisitions, even criminal activity from sellers. It's resilience. And it's been revealing. It's not like I doubted that I have had it, but then just revealing really where the breaking point is. And I think most people can handle a lot more than what they think they can. Yeah, so and almost nothing will tank you. No matter how bad you think it is, when something hits you, almost nothing will tank you. Resilience is the word. And I'll quote a good friend of mine who has this on his wall, is everything is figure outable.
Absolutely. I love that as well. Now, also, Rick, last couple of questions for you. Now, I know you're a musician, so this question you are going to love, right? So I want you to tell us what your last song before you die, go-to track that you absolutely love, that makes you dance around the kitchen, whatever it might be. What's your go-to song? Because we want to include it on our Brave, Bold, Brilliant playlist.
Yeah, that's awesome. I do have a playlist that's called Before the Show. And if there's a moment I need to center myself, one of the best songs that's on there is Fix You by Coldplay. I mean, everybody knows that, and it's I love songs that continuously build that way, but if it's something that you're talking like Before I Die, something that has to be there, it's most definitely Here's My Heart by David Crowder. And it goes back to who I am spiritually. And, I think a lot of life has to do with surrender. And it's not even, the song, of course, is about God, which is where my everything comes from. But I also think that it should be about surrendering to your purpose. And this is calling back to exactly what we talked about before. That's definitely there. I mean, Fix You is a song to get me pumped before I go up on stage, because it's great how it just continuously builds. There's a couple other songs on there, but Here's My Heart by David Crowder is absolutely the number one for me.
Fantastic. See, Rick, you are the gift that keeps giving, because I asked for one and I got two.
Yeah, there you go.
There's so much value, always giving. That's great. And Rick, what does Brave, Bold, Brilliant mean to you?
Oh man, it means winning. That's exactly what it means. And winning is absolutely everything. I mean, I am a competitor. I most definitely am. And I don't know, what's the point in doing any of this stuff unless you're going to try to win? What's the point of keeping score? What's the point in having a stock price? What's the point in tracking revenue and profits and, seeing your kids go away to an amazing musical theater school, or looking after their dreams? If you're not keeping track of how you're doing, there's no way to potentially win. Yeah, so being bold, brave, and brilliant, absolutely, it means winning to me.
What a fabulous, strong end to the podcast, Rick. I have loved chatting with you. Thank you so much. Honestly, it's great.